Have you ever lived a life that looked perfect from the outside, yet inside something was quietly dying? A routine that held you gently, too gently, until you forgot what it meant to feel anything at all? This story is about the moment when the unexpected happens, when a single meeting becomes a fault line through the life you thought was unshakable. When love arrives not politely, not with warning, but like a tide crashing against the shore, refusing to retreat. My name is Alice. I am 45 years old, a mother of two, a wife, a woman who believed her heart had already experienced everything it ever would: love, marriage, routine, comfort, a life measured by grocery lists and school pickups, by quiet dinners and predictable Sundays. From the outside, it looked complete, stable, safe. But one afternoon, as I sat across from my closest friend, she looked at me the way people look at paintings they're trying to understand. Then she said softly, almost gently, "Alice, you're fading. Go do something for you. Anything." I laughed it off. 45-year-old women don't fade, I told her. We dissolve slowly, invisibly, like sugar in warm water. No drama, no noise, just life. But her words stayed with me, followed me, echoed in the quiet corners of my mind. And so, one warm Los Angeles morning, I decided to do something. Not dramatic, not brave, just something. I walked into a yoga studio, not expecting change, not searching for revelations, just hoping to feel a little less numb. I thought it would be ordinary. Instead, it became the doorway to a version of myself I thought was long gone. Because that was the day I saw her. Moon, a woman who didn't shine loudly but glowed softly, like moonlight on deep water. Short black hair, sunlit, warm skin, tattoos like delicate poetry across her collarbones, a presence both quiet and impossible to ignore. I didn't know it then, but the moment I stepped into that room, my life split cleanly into before and after. This is the story of my first love for a woman. A love unexpected, consuming, gentle, and fierce at once. A love that didn't save me, but reminded me I was still alive. If you've ever rediscovered yourself at the very moment you believed you were lost, if you've ever felt something that made you question everything you thought you knew about your own heart, this story is for you. Welcome to the moment everything changed. The door chimed softly as I stepped into the studio, the delicate sound slicing through the quiet like a small invitation. The air smelled of warm cedar, sage, and something floral but faint, like a memory I couldn't quite place. I hesitated in the doorway. I wasn't here because I wanted to be. I was here because someone who loved me realized that I had stopped loving myself. My friend Mara had said it with that blunt tenderness she was famous for. "Alice, you're disappearing. Go move, go breathe, go do yoga, or scream into a pillow, but do something." So here I was, 45 years old, tired, not in a dramatic way, in the quiet, settled way that crept into your bones when too many years passed without surprises. I expected to walk into a room full of strangers stretching in silence. Instead, I walked into her, Moon. She stood at the front of the room, barefoot, arranging blocks and folded blankets like they were part of some ritual. Her short black hair caught the morning light, sharp against her sun-warmed skin. The tattoo across her collarbone shifted gently as she moved. Thin strokes, delicate, almost like wind carved into flesh. She looked up, and her eyes met mine. Dark, steady, eyes that didn't ask questions. They simply saw. Something inside my chest tightened, not painfully, not fearfully, just unexpectedly. "First time?" she asked, her voice low and warm, almost like a hand brushing lightly along my skin. "Yes," I said, though the word came out softer than I meant. She smiled, a small, quiet thing, but so genuine it felt like a light switching on. "Welcome, Alice," she said, and once again she said my name before I told her. Moon's smile faded gently, not because it disappeared, but because it settled, like warmth soaking into skin. She turned back toward the front of the room, giving the class a few last adjustments before we began. And I stood there for a moment longer than I should have, watching her move. She didn't walk, she flowed. Every shift of her body was so deliberate, so precise, that it felt less like she was teaching yoga and more like she was communicating in a language I had forgotten long ago, the language of presence. People spoke softly around me, choosing mats, bending, stretching. Life went on, but something inside me paused. When the class finally settled, Moon stepped forward, hands gently pressed together. "Find a comfortable seat," she said. Her voice carried the softness of a warm cloth placed on a tired body. I lowered myself onto a mat near the back and tried to look anywhere but at her. But there was a pull, quiet, magnetic, undeniable. She sat cross-legged, the tattoo on her collarbone catching the light again. A thin arc like a crescent moon drawn in ink. "Close your eyes," she said, and all at once the world narrowed into breath. Inhale, let your chest rise. Exhale, let the ground hold you. Her voice wasn't just soothing, it was anchoring, a tether pulling me out of the fog I'd lived in for years. "Notice the places in your body that feel tired," she continued. "Not just physically, but emotionally too." Emotionally tired. The words hit me like a confession I hadn't planned to make. My chest tightened, my throat warmed. I suddenly felt exposed, as if she'd read something on my face the moment I walked in. When I opened my eyes again, she was looking directly at me, not in a searching way, in a knowing one, like she understood exactly which part of me was tired and how long I'd been carrying it. Heat bloomed low in my stomach. I looked away first. The class shifted into gentle stretches, and I moved mechanically, trying to follow her instructions, trying to breathe the way she asked, trying not to notice how close she occasionally came to me. But I noticed. God, I noticed. At one point, she walked behind me, and the air around me changed, warmer, more aware. Then her hands were on my shoulders, soft, steady, sure. "Relax here," she murmured, her thumbs pressed lightly along the base of my neck. My breath stuttered, not visibly, I hoped. I felt younger than 45. I felt exposed, undone, woken up in a way I hadn't expected and wasn't sure I wanted. "Better," she whispered near my ear. The sound traveled down my spine like electricity. When her hands lifted, my skin missed her immediately. I shouldn't feel this. I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't be imagining what her hands would feel like anywhere else. But wanting doesn't ask permission. It simply begins. When class ended, she dismissed everyone with a bow of her head. People gathered their things, chatting, laughing, stepping back into their ordinary lives. I stayed seated, not because I meant to, but because my legs didn't seem ready to stand. Moon approached slowly, stopping in front of me. "You did well," she said. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were intense in the way quiet things sometimes are. "I haven't done anything in years," I replied before I could stop myself. It slipped out, more honest than I intended. Moon tilted her head slightly. "Then today," she said gently, "you did more than enough." And there it was again, that feeling of being seen, deeply, unmistakably, uncomfortably seen. I swallowed. "Thank you," I whispered. She held my gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then she smiled, small, soft, devastating, and walked away. I didn't know it then, but that was the exact moment I began to fall. The hours after the class felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of my own body and was watching myself move through the world from somewhere far away. I drove home with the windows down, letting the California air rush over my skin. But it wasn't the wind I felt. It was her hands, still warm on my shoulders, still gentle at the base of my neck, still there, long after she walked away. I kept replaying it in my mind, the softness of her voice, the quiet certainty in her touch, the way she said my name like she wasn't reading it from a list, but had known it for years. I hadn't felt something like that in, God, I didn't even remember when. By the time I turned onto my street, the familiar sight of my house, blue shutters, trimmed bushes, the welcome mat I'd bought 12 years ago, felt strangely distant, like a place I used to live but no longer quite belonged to. Inside, everything smelled like routine: coffee grounds, laundry soap, a hint of cinnamon from the candle I lit every evening. A home, my home. But something in me wasn't home anymore. "Mom?" My daughter peeked from behind the fridge door. She was 15, shy, observant, the type of child who noticed things adults missed. "You're glowing," she said, brow raised. I laughed, too quickly, too loudly. "Just yoga," I said. "Your Aunt Mara made me go." She nodded, though her eyes lingered on me as if studying a puzzle she wanted to solve. I escaped to my room under the excuse of needing a shower. Inside, I leaned against the bathroom sink and stared at my reflection. My face looked the same, maybe a little flushed, maybe a little brighter. But there was something in my eyes, a spark I didn't recognize. I touched the side of my neck where Moon's thumbs had rested, and a shiver ran through me. It was absurd. I was 45, married, stable, predictable. Women like me didn't suddenly fall apart because a yoga instructor touched their shoulders. And yet, the memory of her breath near my ear made my heart beat in a rhythm I thought I'd forgotten. I stood under the hot shower, hoping the water would wash her out of me. But it didn't. If anything, it made the feeling stronger. The awareness, the awakening, the sharp sense of being alive. When evening came and the house quieted, my husband asked casually, "So, how was it, the yoga thing?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no sound came. How could I tell him? It was the first time in years someone saw me. "It was good," I finally said. "Relaxing." A lie, not because the experience wasn't real, but because it was too real. Because if I told him the truth, I would have to tell myself the truth too. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the edge of my couch, staring at the soft glow of the lamp. I felt restless in my own skin, too tightly wrapped inside a life that no longer quite fit. And then, without really thinking, I reached for my phone and opened the yoga studio's website. There she was, Moon, in a small photo near the instructor list. Her short hair slightly wind-tousled, her expression calm, a faint smile sitting in the corner of her lips. I clicked on her bio. Moon Lee, instructor, breathwork guide, movement specialist, it read. She believes in creating space, in the body, in the breath, and in the parts of yourself you've forgotten to listen to. Forgotten to listen to. The words sank into me like warm water. I didn't sign up for another class. Not yet. But I watched her picture for far too long. That night, I dreamt of her. Not in a romantic way. There was no touch, no heat, no stolen kiss. Just her standing at the edge of an endless ocean. Her tattoo glowing softly like moonlight. Her face calm, serene. And she was looking at me, the way she did in class, seeing me, knowing me, holding the pieces of me together without a single word. When I woke, my chest felt full in a way I couldn't explain. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I wanted something. I didn't know what exactly, or how dangerous it might be, or how much it would change. I only knew this. I wanted to go back. I didn't plan to return the next day. In fact, I spent the entire morning talking myself out of it. You're overreacting. It was just yoga. She touches everyone's shoulders. It meant nothing. But my body disagreed. By noon, I felt restless, as if the world had shifted slightly off its axis, and only one place felt balanced. The studio, her room, her presence. So I went back, and the moment I stepped through the glass doors, I felt it again, that soft settling inside me, like my bones remembered something before my mind did. Moon was arranging bolsters at the front, her movements slow, intentional, peaceful in a way that made me acutely aware of every frantic beat in my own chest. She looked up, and when her eyes found mine, it wasn't surprise I saw. It was recognition, like she had expected me. "Welcome back, Alice," she said, her voice low and warm. My heart stuttered, a small, quiet misstep. I nodded, unable to form anything resembling a normal greeting, and settled onto a mat. The room filled quickly, soft chatter rising like dust in sunlight. But all I noticed was her, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way her tattoo, the crescent on her collarbone, shifted when she exhaled. And then I saw something new. As she lifted her arm to adjust a strap on one of the blocks, her wrist turned slightly, and there, resting just above her pulse, was a tiny red tattoo, a moon, a simple, delicate curve, inked in deep crimson. Barely the size of a fingertip, but vivid, red moon. I stared longer than I meant to. It felt symbolic, as if that small mark had been placed exactly where a hand would touch during a greeting, a gesture, a moment of connection. A moon meant to be felt, and for a brief, impossible second, I imagined tracing my thumb over it, softly, curiously, the way someone touches a delicate piece of art. Moon noticed. Her eyes flicked to me, then to her wrist. A faint smile, the kind that reveals nothing and everything, curved her lips. "It's an old symbol," she said quietly as she walked past my mat. "Red moon, renewal, new cycle." Her voice dipped lower. "Change." My breath caught. Change. I didn't know if she was talking about herself, or me, or us, or if she was simply naming the symbol. But the word wrapped itself around my spine and held on. The class began. I tried to focus on my breath, on the stretch of my limbs, on anything that didn't involve her voice moving through me like warm water. "Lift your chest, soften your ribs, let the body remember what ease feels like." But my attention kept drifting back to her wrist, that tiny mark pulsing gently with each movement she made. A red moon, renewal, change, and then it happened. A moment small enough to be innocent, significant enough not to be. Moon walked around the room, adjusting people, guiding breath, grounding bodies. When she reached me, she knelt beside my mat. Close, too close. Her hand hovered near my arm, waiting, always asking without words. I nodded, barely. Permission. She placed her fingertips lightly just below my elbow, and that was when I saw it up close, the red moon on her wrist. So close I could see the thin edges of the ink. So close I could feel the warmth of her skin. Her pulse beat beneath it, calm and steady, while mine was frantic, stumbling, uncontained. "Let the arm soften," she murmured. Her wrist brushed mine, barely a whisper of contact, a touch so light it could have been accidental, but it wasn't. I felt it. She felt it. Her eyes lifted to mine. For a fraction of a second, It felt like the world narrowed to the space between her wrist and my skin. A breath, a question, a possibility. Then she stood, moving to the next student, her expression calm again. Teacher, guide, moonlight returning to its distant place in the sky. But her touch lingered. The image of the red moon burned into my mind, beating in time with my pulse. And by the end of the class, as people rolled up their mats and headed toward the door, I realized something unmistakable. This wasn't just attraction, not a spark, not a crush. It was a shift, a quiet, unstoppable turning of the tides inside me. And the red moon on her wrist, it wasn't just ink, it was a signal, a sign, a beginning. Home should have felt familiar, predictable, soft around the edges, like a place that had held me for years. But that evening, everything felt slightly off, as if someone had nudged my life a few centimeters to the left, and nothing fit quite the same anymore. I stirred pasta on the stove while my mind floated somewhere far above the kitchen tiles. My son was talking about a school project. My daughter asked where her favorite hoodie was. The dog scratched at the back door, and through all of it, I heard my husband's voice, warm, amused. Alice, hey, Earth to Alice, you're on another planet today. I forced a smile, something light, something believable. I'm just tired, I said. But tired didn't explain why I'd boiled the same pot of water twice, or why I'd put an empty pan in the fridge, or why I kept glancing at my wrist, as if expecting to find a tiny red moon, as if it belonged there. All evening I moved through the house like someone walking through fog, seeing everything, touching everything, yet feeling nothing clearly. My husband bumped his shoulder gently against mine while setting the table. Long week, he joked. You've been drifting lately. Should I be jealous of yoga? If he knew, if I knew. I laughed, but the sound felt thin, paper light. Later, after the kids went to their rooms and the house settled into that familiar nighttime quiet, I stood in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, staring at my own reflection. 45 years old. A woman who should have understood herself by now. A woman who thought she already lived through every version of love she would ever feel. But there was something new behind my eyes, a brightness I didn't recognize, a pulse that didn't belong to my old life. I leaned my palms on the sink. What are you doing? I whispered to myself. My mind answered with a voice that wasn't quite mine, or maybe it was the part of me I had ignored for years. You're waking up. I closed my eyes, and then she appeared behind them, uninvited but welcome. Moon, her calm breath, her steady gaze, the red moon on her wrist pulsing softly like it held a heartbeat of its own. Why can't I stop thinking about you? I whispered into the quiet room. The house didn't respond, but something inside me did. Because it wasn't obsession, it wasn't fantasy, it wasn't desire. It was recognition, as if something in her saw something in me, and refused to let me fall back asleep. I climbed into bed next to my husband, listening to him breathe deeply, peacefully. I used to match my breath to his. Tonight I couldn't. My breath found a different rhythm, slow, deeper, softer, Moon's rhythm. My last thought before sleep took me was a question. If one moment can tilt an entire life, what happens if I let it? And somewhere in the quiet, a softer truth rose. You already have. When I entered the studio that afternoon, the world felt brighter than it should have. Too bright, too sharp, as if my senses were tuned to one thing only, her. Moon stood at the front, adjusting mats with quiet intention. The tiny red moon on her wrist glowed when the sun shifted across it. She lifted her head before I made a sound. "Alice," she said softly, as if she'd been waiting. The class unfolded slowly, fluidly, like warm tide water, but I barely registered the poses. I felt only the hum of her presence, the way she seemed to move with or through the air around me. Halfway through, she came behind me, her hands finding my shoulders with calm certainty. "Lift your heart," she whispered. "Let it open." Her fingers traced a soft line down my spine. My breath broke. The world sharpened. When she stepped away, I felt the absence like temperature. The class ended. Students gathered their mats, drifting out one by one. I lingered, pretending, waiting. Moon approached me with a thoughtful, almost searching expression. "You were somewhere else today," she said. "Far away, or maybe too deep inside." I swallowed. She lifted her wrist slightly, almost absent-mindedly, letting the red moon catch the afternoon light. "This weekend," Moon said, her voice quiet but sure, "I'll be giving a lecture at a workshop, something intimate, the search for self. It's not really about yoga, it's about returning, remembering." Her eyes softened. "About waking up." My heart fluttered painfully. A lecture, from her, about searching for oneself. It felt like she had chosen the words specifically for me. "I think," she added, "that you might find something there you've been missing." Her voice dipped on the last line, almost a confession. "I'd like to come," I whispered before I could stop myself. Moon smiled, a slow, warm smile that felt like a hand closing gently around mine. "Good," she murmured. "I hoped you'd say that." She stepped back, but the heat of her presence stayed wrapped around me, like breath on the skin. "See you this weekend, Alice." This time it didn't sound like an appointment. It sounded like the beginning of something neither of us had fully admitted yet. The house felt too small that evening, too quiet, too ordinary for the storm building quietly inside me. I tried to cook dinner, but my hands didn't obey. I burned the onions, forgot the salt, stared into a pot of boiling water like it could give me answers. My husband noticed, of course. "You okay?" he asked casually, closing the fridge with his hip. "You've been distracted lately." Distracted. The word landed too close to the truth. "Just thinking," I said, hoping it sounded normal. But what I didn't tell him was that my thoughts were looping endlessly around one question. What do you wear to meet a woman who's starting to shift the ground beneath your life? After dinner, I escaped to the bedroom under the excuse of organizing laundry. But really, I stood in front of my closet, staring at clothes that suddenly felt wrong. Everything looked either too heavy or too revealing or too not me. I pulled out a simple blouse, too formal, a soft sweater, too intimate, a dress I used to love, too hopeful. Why was this so difficult? It was just a lecture, just a weekend workshop, just one woman, and yet part of me whispered, not just. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding a folded shirt in my hands, and pressed my fingers into the fabric to stop them from trembling. How was I supposed to act when I saw her again? Calm? Friendly? Detached? Could I trust myself to even say hello without my voice shaking? I imagined the moment, walking into that room, seeing her across it, her gaze finding mine the way it always did. My stomach flipped painfully. Why did she make me feel so unfinished, so half-formed, so alive? A voice inside me, small, honest, impossible to ignore, whispered, "Because she sees you in a way you haven't been seen in years." I swallowed hard. I wasn't planning anything. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I told myself that again and again, but wanting to be seen, wanting to feel awake again. That part felt dangerously close to longing. I pressed the blouse to my chest and closed my eyes. "What are you doing, Alice?" The answer rose softly, like a truth I'd been avoiding. "I'm meeting myself. And maybe, just maybe, meeting her too." The building where the workshop was held didn't look like a place where lives could shift. Just a quiet room in a quiet community center, tucked between a coffee shop and a flower stand. But as I approached the glass doors, my hands trembled. This wasn't yoga. This wasn't routine. This was something else. I arrived earlier than I meant to, 20 minutes before the start, hoping the empty room would give me time to breathe. But the room wasn't empty. Moon was already there. She stood near the window arranging a small stack of notebooks, her posture relaxed, almost serene. Her hair was slightly tousled, as if she'd run her hands through it in thought. And for a moment I only watched her, the way the morning light softened her features, the quiet steadiness of her presence. Then she looked up, and everything in me stilled. "Alice," she said, and her voice felt like warm dusk settling over water. "You came early." I opened my mouth to apologize, to explain, to invent something casual. But she stepped closer, her expression softening in a way that made my breath catch. "I'm glad," she said simply. "I was waiting for you." The words hit me like a quiet, powerful wave. Waiting. For me. Not hoping I'd come, not expecting a full group. Waiting. For me. I felt heat rise under my skin, and I had to look away before she saw too much. "I didn't want to be late," I managed. Moon gave a small smile, almost shy, almost knowing. "You're not late," she said. "You're right on time." Right on time, as if this moment, this morning, this meeting had been meant. She offered me one of the notebooks she'd just placed on the table. "Here," she said, "for the workshop. It's for your writing, your thoughts, your truths. Our fingers brushed, a light touch, barely there, but enough to make my pulse leap. I sat in the front row, not trusting myself to stand any closer to her. Other people began to arrive slowly, quietly, filling seats, murmuring greetings, and yet the world felt narrowed to a small, invisible line that stretched only between her and me. Moon started the lecture by lighting a small candle. The flame flickered, then steadied. "Today," she said, "we're talking about what happens when a life begins to feel too small for the person who's living it." My breath caught. She continued, "About the moment you realize you're not lost, you're simply unfinished." Unfinished. The word moved through me like a current. Moon's eyes drifted over the room, slowly, gently, then paused on me. Not briefly, not by accident, held. "As long as you are breathing," she said, "it's not too late to return to yourself." My fingers tightened around the notebook she'd given me. For the first time in years, I felt hope unfurl slowly in my chest. Shy, fragile, glowing, because she wasn't just speaking to the room, she was speaking to me, and I knew she knew it. The lecture ended with a kind of silence I didn't want to move through. Not heavy, not awkward, just full. People slowly gathered their things, thanking Moon, drifting toward the door. I stayed seated, notebook in my hands, my thumb tracing the edge of the cover. At some point during the lecture, I had written something inside it, a few lines, maybe more, but I couldn't remember doing it. My thoughts had been too loud, too soft, too scattered. I closed the notebook quickly and slipped it into my bag before anyone could notice how tightly I held it. Later, I told myself, not now. Now was too fragile. Moon approached as the last group of people left. "You stayed," she said softly. I nodded. I wasn't ready to go. Something in her eyes warmed at that. She didn't rush me, didn't fill the silence. She just stood with me, and somehow the room felt larger and smaller at the same time. "Do you want to walk a bit?" she asked. My breath caught. Not from surprise, but from how natural it sounded, like she was inviting me into a gentle continuation of something neither of us was ready to name. "Yes," I said. Outside, the world smelled like autumn after rain, that soft, rare Los Angeles freshness that arrives without warning. The pavement was still damp, reflecting small pieces of sky. The air carried hints of eucalyptus, wet dust, and something cool and clean that felt almost seasonal, almost nostalgic. We walked through the small park nearby. The trees weren't blazing with color, but their leaves were darker from the rain, edges curled, holding drops that glittered before falling. Not a dramatic fall season, just a whisper of it, a suggestion. People passed us, cars hummed, a dog barked somewhere, but none of it felt entirely real. The world was both distant and too close, blurred at the edges. My thoughts wandered far, to everything I had been, everything I wasn't anymore, and yet circled back to Moon every few seconds, like she was the center of some quiet orbit. She walked beside me with her hands tucked lightly into her pockets, calm, steady, grounded. Her voice broke the silence gently. "Do you ever feel," she asked, Like you're living a life that doesn't quite fit anymore. I froze. That's exactly how I feel, I whispered. Moon nodded as if she expected that answer. We passed under a row of damp branches, raindrops falling softly around us. There's a place nearby, she said. A small Asian restaurant. Comfort food. Simple. Warm. A beat. Would you like to go? The invitation settled inside me. Not romantic, not innocent. Something in between. Something warm. Possible. My heart pressed against my ribs. Yes, I said quietly. I'd like that. Moon's smile was small, but it felt like sunlight breaking through morning fog. Come on, she said softly. And as we walked toward the restaurant, our steps soft on the wet path, I felt something shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like a door opening somewhere inside me. A door that, once opened, couldn't be closed again. The restaurant Moon led me to wasn't flashy or loud. It sat on a small side street, half hidden behind bamboo plants and a narrow lantern that glowed with soft amber light. Inside, everything felt delicate. Not fancy, delicate. Thin wooden panels carved with flowing wave patterns. Soft paper lamps shaped like lotus petals. Muted colors, minimalist lines. It was the kind of beauty you only noticed if you slowed down enough to see it. Moon belonged there effortlessly. We sat at a low table by the window, and the moment we settled, something inside me loosened. Like a knot I'd been carrying for years finally slipped free. Talking to her felt strangely natural. Not the careful politeness I was used to, but a kind of easy warmth, like we were two people who had met long before this life. Moon ordered for both of us without hesitation, not controlling, just confident, gentle. Trust me? She asked. I do, I said, surprising myself. She smiled. The food came quickly. Small dishes, simple and beautiful. Broth with ginger and lemongrass. Warm rice. Tiny bowls of pickled vegetables. Everything arranged like a quiet pattern. Aesthetic is important, Moon said, noticing my gaze. It teaches the mind to breathe. I felt myself exhale without realizing I'd been holding my breath. We talked lightly at first, movies, the rain, Los Angeles, pretending it has seasons. Then Moon leaned back a little, her expression softening. When I was a child, she said, I used to climb the roof of my grandmother's house at night. I wasn't allowed, of course, but the rooftop felt bigger than the world below. You weren't scared? She laughed, a soft, sudden laugh that lit her face. Oh, I was terrified, but I climbed anyway. Her laughter made me laugh too, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in what felt like years. Moon rested her elbow on the table, her hand close to mine. Too close. And you? She asked. Were you brave as a child? I opened my mouth to answer, something honest, something small, when her fingers brushed mine. Not dramatically, not boldly, just a soft touch, as if she were tracing a line of energy between us, warm, intentional, brief, but enough to send a quiet spark through my chest. I kept my voice steady as if nothing happened. I think, I said slowly, I used to be brave in ways I didn't understand. Moon's eyes held mine for a moment that felt longer than a moment. "You still are," she said. I smiled, small, careful, and looked down at the table, pretending to focus on my bowl. But inside, something glowed. A quiet flame, steady and impossible to ignore. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid of it. The night outside the restaurant felt different from the night we had stepped into. The rain had dried, but the world still carried its afterglow, that soft, fragile quiet that exists only when the city is catching its breath. Moon walked beside me, her hands in the pockets of her jacket, her steps unhurried. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and something sweet drifting from the nearby tea shop. Above us, the sky was a deep, velvety blue. We didn't head straight toward the street. Instead, Moon turned toward the park. "Come," she said gently. "It's quieter this way." We entered the winding path lined with trees, not dramatic autumn trees, but sycamores and maples darkened from the evening moisture, their few fragile red leaves clinging stubbornly to the branches. The lamps along the path glowed with a soft gold that made everything look slightly unreal. We walked without speaking for a while, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that needed to be said was already in the air between us. My hands felt warm and cold at the same time. My heart was steady and erratic in the same breath. I felt like 1,000 questions and one quiet certainty. Moon slowed her steps near a wooden bench and looked up at the branches above us. "Funny," she murmured. "In LA, you have to search for autumn, but sometimes it finds you anyway." She reached up and caught a leaf drifting down, a small, delicate red maple leaf, its edges soft, imperfect, but still glowing with color. She turned to me. "Here," she said quietly. Her palm opened. The leaf lay in the center of it like a tiny flame. "For what?" I whispered. Moon's eyes softened. "For tonight," she said. "For being honest with yourself. A beat. For coming." I took the leaf from her hand. Our fingers brushed, and my breath caught, gently, helplessly. We stood there, facing each other, just a little too close. The city noise faded. The air grew still. I could hear my heartbeat, and hers, or maybe I imagined it. Moon's gaze held mine, calm, steady, searching, but never demanding. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Alice, may I?" For a moment, I didn't understand. Then I did. I nodded, not quickly, not nervously, but slowly, as if my entire body was answering for me. Moon stepped closer. Her hand rose, hesitated, then gently touched my cheek. Her thumb barely grazed my skin, warm and soft. And then she kissed me. A tender, careful, almost trembling kiss, not claiming, not asking for more, just a quiet meeting of breath and warmth. A question answered without words, a beginning, not a rush. It felt like she was giving me every chance to pull away, and I didn't. My hand found her arm, lightly, as if to say, "I'm here, I'm not afraid." When she finally drew back, her forehead remained against mine, our breaths mingling, soft and uneven. She whispered, "I've wanted to do that since the first day you walked into the studio." I closed my eyes, feeling the world tilt in a slow, beautiful circle. I don't know what's happening to me, I breathed. Moon smiled. I could hear it in her voice even before I saw it. You don't have to know, she whispered. Just feel. A few minutes later, she called me a taxi. Not because she wanted me to leave, but because she felt how fragile I had become, how easily a moment could turn overwhelming. The taxi pulled up quietly to the curb. Moon opened the door for me, her hand brushing my back. That touch alone enough to send heat through me again. "Good night, Alice," she murmured. "Good night," I whispered back. When the car began to move, I looked down at my hands. The small red leaf rested in my palm. My heart was racing, my breath uneven. The city lights blurred through the window. I leaned my head back against the seat, eyes closed. My whole body felt light, as if I had stepped into a dream I wasn't ready to wake from. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel lost. I felt found. The morning came softly, not with noise, not with responsibility, but like a breath warm against my ear. I opened my eyes and immediately knew. Something inside me had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a door quietly unlocking in a room I had forgotten existed. The house was still asleep, my husband's steady breathing beside me, the soft hum of the air conditioner, the distant sound of a car passing outside. Ordinary life, completely untouched, except I wasn't untouched. On the nightstand, where I'd placed it carefully before falling asleep, lay the red maple leaf Moon had given me. I reached for it slowly, almost reverently. In the daylight, its veins looked even more intricate, thin, branching lines like delicate blood vessels, like the map of a living pulse, like a fingerprint pressed directly into my heart. I traced one line with the tip of my finger. It felt fragile, impossibly fragile, and yet it held an entire moment inside it. A kiss, a touch, a breath shared in the quiet of the park. And now, morning. The questions rose almost instantly, as if they had been waiting patiently for me to wake. What do I do now? How do I walk through today like everything is the same? How do I see my husband's face, my children's faces, when my own heart feels like it has turned itself toward the sun after years of darkness? I sat up slowly, holding the leaf in both hands. My chest was warm and tight at the same time. Part of me wanted to hide under the covers, curl up, protect this feeling before the world could touch it. Another part wanted to throw open every door, step outside and shout the truth to the sky like a confession. I am alive. I feel something. I feel someone. And her name is Moon. But I did neither. Instead, I placed the leaf on my lap and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, maybe the first time in my adult life, I wanted to be alone. Not lonely, alone. I wanted to put on music, let it wash over me, sit in the corner of the room, hug my knees to my chest, and let myself feel every trembling, terrifying, beautiful thing happening inside me. I wanted silence and song at the same time, solitude and confession, darkness and light. I wanted her. My mind replayed her voice, her laugh, the gentle way she'd said my name, the warmth of her lips against mine. My heart pressed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. A tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming truth. Last night didn't end. It simply followed me into morning. I lifted the leaf again, held it to my chest. It felt like holding a secret, a beginning, a quiet fire no one else could see. Outside, the sun grew brighter, the city woke, the world moved forward, and I stayed still, holding on to the moment like it was the only solid thing left. This was the morning my life quietly changed direction. Not with a decision, not with a plan, just with a single, undeniable truth. I didn't want to go back to who I was yesterday. I breathed in slowly, letting that truth settle inside me. And I knew this story wasn't finished. It was only beginning, to be continued in the next chapter.